Hey everyone, and welcome to Real Talk Grimm Edition. I'm your host Josh, and this is the place where we dive into the dark, whimsical world of the Brothers Grimm. Whether you're a longtime fan of fairy tales or just starting to discover them, you're in the right spot. Each episode, I'll read a classic Grimm's fairy tale and then explore its deeper meanings, lessons, and how it may apply to our modern culture. From the well-known stories like Cinderella to more obscure ones that still carry a punch, we're going to get into what makes these tales so timeless, and sometimes downright eerie. But this isn't just about reading stories. It's about peeling back the layers and looking at what these stories really teach us. The Grimm brothers didn't shy away from showing the darker side of life. And in many ways, those darker elements hold some of the most powerful messages. Whether it's about good versus evil, human nature, or just the consequences of choices. So whether you're here for the ride of a familiar story or to uncover something you haven't heard before, stick with me as we explore the fascinating and sometimes twisted world of Grimm's fairy tales. Today, we're going to be reading The Nail. So grab your favorite drink, sit back, and enjoy the tale. The Nail. A merchant had done good business at the fair. He had sold his wares and lined his money bags with gold and silver. Then he wanted to travel homewards and be in his own house before nightfall. So he packed his trunk with the money on his horse and rode away. At noon he rested in a town, and when he wanted to go farther, the stable boy brought out his horse and said, "A nail is wanting, sir, in the shoe of its left hind foot." "Let it be wanting," answered the merchant. "The shoe will certainly stay on for the 6 miles I have still to go. I am in a hurry." In the afternoon, when he once more alighted and had his horse fed, the stable boy went into the room to him and said, "Sir, a shoe is missing from your horse's left hind foot. Shall I take him back to the blacksmith?" "Let it still be wanting," answered the man. "The horse can very well hold out for the next couple of miles which remain. I am in haste." He rode forth, but before long the horse began to limp. It had not limped long before it began to stumble, and it had not stumbled long before it fell down and broke its leg. The merchant was forced to leave the horse where it was and unbuckle the trunk and take it on his back and go home on foot. And there he did not arrive until quite late at night. "And that unlucky nail," said he to himself, "has caused all this disaster. Hasten slowly." And that's our story. And we've all been there, right? That moment when we think, it's not a big deal, I'll deal with it later. And then later comes around and suddenly that small problem has turned into a huge problem. And that's exactly what happens here in The Nail. And honestly, it's a lesson a lot of us could use a reminder about. So let's get into it. All right, if I had to sum up the takeaway from this story in one sentence, it would be, small neglects can lead to big consequences. The merchant in the story had every opportunity to fix the problem early. A nail was missing from his horse's shoe. No big deal, right? But instead of stopping to get it fixed, he shrugs it off. He's in a hurry. He just wants to get home. Besides, what's the worst that could happen? Well, as it turns out, a lot. First, the shoe comes off. Then, the horse starts limping. Then, boom, broken leg. Now, instead of riding home, The merchant is stuck carrying his heavy trunk, trudging along on foot, way later than he would have been if he had just taken a few minutes to fix the problem in the first place. It's like the ultimate "I told you so" moment, and all because he didn't want to take an extra minute to deal with a small issue before it became a big one. Sound familiar? Here's the thing, this isn't just some old school lesson for merchants riding around on horses. This applies to everything. The idea that ignoring small problems lead to much bigger ones, that's not just fairy tale logic, that's real life. And the phrase at the end, hasten slowly? Well, that's just basically an old-fashioned way of saying, hey, slow down, pay attention. Rushing through things might feel like you're saving time, but really, you're just setting yourself up for bigger problems later on. And honestly, this applies to so many different areas of life. So let's fast forward a few hundred years. You probably are not a merchant riding a horse home from a fair, but I guarantee you, there have been situations where you've ignored something small and it totally backfired. Let's talk about some real-life examples. Work and productivity. Have you ever sent an email without proofing it, only to realize you just told yourself to duck off because of a tiny typo? Yeah, not great. Or maybe you were working on a project and there was a small issue, something you figured wasn't worth worrying about at the time. I'll deal with it later, you think. And then later comes around and suddenly that tiny problem has turned into a full-blown crisis. This happens all the time in tech. A single line of bad code, it can bring down an entire system. There's a reason software companies spend so much time testing and debugging, because a tiny mistake, if ignored, can end up costing millions. And it's not just a tech thing, because it's everywhere. A missed decimal point in accounting could mean serious financial losses. A small miscalculation in construction, well, could mean a building collapse. The details matter. How about something a little more personal? Your health and well-being. We've all ignored small health issues before. Maybe you skipped a dentist appointment because, it's just a little toothache. Fast forward a few months and now you need a root canal. Or maybe you brushed off a little cough because you just don't have time to be sick right now. Next thing you know, you're stuck in bed with pneumonia. This is why preventative care is so important. It's literally the equivalent of fixing the missing nail before your whole horse or body breaks down. And then how about something a little deeper? Relationships. Have you ever had a small issue with a friend or a partner that you probably could have talked about but decided not to? Maybe they said something that bothered you, but you didn't want to start a fight. It's not a big deal, you tell yourself. But then weeks go by, maybe months, and suddenly that one little thing has turned into a huge deal. Resentment builds, small annoyances pile up, and before you know it, you're in a full-blown argument about something that could have been avoided if you had just addressed it early on. Communication is like that missing nail. Fix the issue early, and everything runs smoothly. Ignore it, and it might just break down completely. How about infrastructure and safety? That's a big deal, especially right now. Think about things like roads, bridges, and airplanes. A tiny crack in a bridge might not seem like a big deal at first, but if it's ignored, the bridge could collapse. Or take airplane maintenance. There's a reason why the FAA requires planes to go through tons of safety checks before every flight. Because one loose bolt, one overlooked issue, could mean disaster. We don't always think about it, but the world around us is full of these little details that need to be maintained. And when they aren't, the consequences can be catastrophic. So at the end of the day, the nail is a super simple story with a super important lesson. Pay attention to the small things, whether it's your work, your health, your relationships, or even the way we take care of the world around us. Cutting corners and ignoring little problems rarely ends well. So what are the takeaways here? Well, slow down. Check the details and fix the nail before it costs you something much bigger. Because trust me, taking the extra time to deal with something now is way better than dealing with a disaster later. And that wraps up this episode of Real Talk, Grimm Edition. I hope you enjoyed our dive into this story and its deeper meanings as much as I did. Now, if you like what you heard, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes. And if you have thoughts on today's tale, whether you agree, disagree, or you have your own take, I want to hear from you. You can reach out to us on social media at Real Talk on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky, or send us an email to therealrealtalk@gmail.com. Let me know what you think, or just to say hi. And if you're enjoying the show, consider leaving a rating or review. It really helps others find us and keeps the conversation going. Speaking of our conversation, next time we'll be reading Tom Thumb. But until next time, thank you for listening. Stay curious, question the stories around you, and keep exploring the darker side of fairy tales.